You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
CYTV here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WYBC. I hope that you enjoyed a restful weekend because we are hitting the ground running. Breaking just before we hopped on the air, Representative Anna Paulina Luna to Chair James Comer over in the House Oversight Committee has just referred Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution for knowingly allowing Somali fraud to continue unabated, uninvestigated fully for years. Here's Anna Paulina Luna.
Chair recognizes Ms. Luna.
Thank you, Chairman Comer. Honorable Robbins, based
I realize that you can't practically, let's make sure we got the audio right.
on your record before your committee, when did Governor Walz first become aware of widespread fraud in Minnesota social service programs?
I would assume that he has been aware of it since he ran for office for governor in 2018.
By 2017, DHS investigators warned CCAP fraud could exceed 50%. What was that information elevated to the governor's office?
Yes, there was an OLA report.
Thank you, ma'am. By 2020, state officials knew feeding our future invoices were fraudulent. We know that payments continued to the AG's knowledge. Did they continue to the governor's knowledge as well?
Yes.
Attorney General Ellison agreed on tape to fight Minnesota's own Department of Human and Health Services in exchange for Somali political and financial support. In your personal opinion, do you believe it is a possibility that Governor Walz also made that personal deal, or that he at least knew about the Attorney General's agreement?
I don't know.
Okay. I don't want to rehash what you guys have spent hours answering. We know that there's a big issue with the fraud in Minnesota. So on a number of things, I'd first like to point out, thank you for being here today, but because of your testimony and because of some of the evidence that we've seen brought forward, as well as I'm sure the fact that this committee, I assume, at Chairman Comer's direction, will be soon subpoenaing AG Ellison, I would like to make criminal referrals regarding Governor Walz as well as AG Ellison. As you know, U.S. Code 371 and U.S. Code 2, which deals with criminalized conspiracies to defraud the United States and establishes liability for individuals who knowingly aid or abet the commission of federal offense, includes willful blindness or deliberate inaction where duties to act exist. So I will be referring them later on today.
Now, since that referral, because this is where the rubber meets the road, what actually has occurred? Well, we've seen both Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison brought before the House Oversight Committee, looked through, giving the certain levels of testimony on what it was that they did, what it was they said they didn't do. And now we have information that inside the Department of Justice, there are charges that are possibly being prepared. And I have to say possibly because until the charges are over the finish line, we can't actually relay those yet. But according to the Trump administration's new fraud team, there exists copious evidence. I like saying the word copious on the air, real fun word there. Copious evidence that Tim Walz, at least at the very minimum, just the bare minimum, Tim Walz ignored the numerous complaints, pleas, issues, and questions from his own party, members of the legislature, that reached out to the governor's office and said, hey, there are these levels of fraud that are currently going on. We've reached out to Attorney General Keith Ellison's office. There wasn't anything that we really were able to do there that was considered moving forward on the action. Tim Walz then acted to quiet, to, in a way, censor the legislative auditor of the Minnesota state government. And so now it appears as though you can make a case, though Tim Walz is trying to kind of flip it around on its head, that the fraud investigation in his state, which he finally got around to charging individuals, investigating individuals, and then maybe haltingly so, has tried to brag about how he actually was on it the entire time. Essentially, the evidence still exists that he tried to silence the legislative auditor, which you can't do. That's not a thing that you can do. That can be considered evidence. So the Department of Justice acting on this particular referral is one of the things that you can probably be looking for this week. So the House Oversight Committee has been sending documents since January, when the initial referral to the Department of Justice by Representative Anna Paulina Luna of Florida was made, has been going through all of these particular instances, all of the subpoenas laid out in front. Of course, we remember Tim Walz, Keith Ellison brought before the House committee. What does this mean going forward? What this means going forward is that you are likely to see either a call from perhaps Democrats inside of Minnesota state government calling on Tim Walz to resign and allow the lieutenant governor, who thinks that in the Ojibwe language that she's whatever, Sir talks a lot or dances with nonsense, that might have to be the person that they trust to take over, while Tim Walz organizes things in his own stead for a legal defense. Because if you're dealing with a fraud investigation at this level, there's nothing that suggests that you as the governor can turn around and use funds either from your campaign or use funds from the state treasury to fend off this particular incoming federal lawsuit. So we're going to have to see what Attorney General Pam Bondi down in Memphis, a couple of quiet nods to dealing with fraud at the Minnesota state level and then at the federal level. We'll keep you guys up to date on how this develops over time. Now, I also want to make it clear, over on the Senate side of things, Colin McDonald, a career prosecutor, is going through the senatorial process to lead the Department of Justice Fraud Enforcement Division. We're going to have to see how that moves forward, because if the Senate goes to recess and we have a nice little lovely Easter break and, Easter egg hunting and, Bing Crosby, sings In Your Easter Bonnet, well, there's a good chance that that could be shuffled under the stack, and Tim Walz could be looking to get a couple of extra months out of not an active criminal charge series while still the governor of Minnesota. Now, this brings us over to, because of course it does, New York Attorney General Letitia James. So according to New York Attorney General Letitia, definitely didn't commit mortgage fraud, wink, James. She said, quote, "I'm suing the Trump administration for illegally threatening to withhold billions in critical U.S. Department of Agriculture funding unless states comply with their political priorities. This would cause chaos for states that need these funds to feed families, support farmers, and keep communities safe." So the issue at hand that she is arguing about, the lawsuit that she has filed, is all rolled into a complaint that the Trump administration had suggested that if Letitia James did not turn over certain security information, if she did not turn over a number of details on immigration statuses, and also some of the state's financial information regarding grants from, let's say, the New York City mayor's office, then the Trump administration would simply turn off the federal spigot. And she sued over that threat, which is that's a pretty wild thing to do. That is a pretty wild thing to do, to just sue based on the threat, just on the indication that you might, going forward, cut off some kind of funding conditions by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. That brings us over to some of the other fraud cases, things that you were told weren't going on. A Brazilian national has now pled guilty to conspiracy to obtain driver's licenses for illegal aliens. Now, this was back on Monday, March 16th last week from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts. We have new information on this, though. This defendant, who conspired to fraudulently apply for driver's licenses, did so for what was initially thought to be 250, 300 individuals. Now we understand this to be over 1,000 individuals who resided in states that prohibited illegal aliens from obtaining licenses. Now, the federal government is cracking down on this in a number of ways. And this comes down to immigration customs enforcement in the airports around the country today. So the president of the United States ordered immigration customs enforcement agents sent to 13 of the following airports: Chicago O'Hare, Cleveland, Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta, Houston, John F. Kennedy, New York's LaGuardia, Louis Armstrong's New Orleans International, the Puerto Rico Luis Muñoz Mar, I don't know how to pronounce that, the Puerto Rico International Airport, Newark, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Sky Harbor, Pittsburgh, and Southwest Florida International. All of those had ICE agents show up today. And I'm going to level with you. Right out here at the front, right off the top of the bat, you had the media outlets announcing that the end was nigh. So you have Washington Post stepping out, the harrowing music. And it's just a group of guys and gals, rather diverse, more diverse than I was told ICE was supposed to be, out there just helping the Transportation Security Administration handle the workload because they're currently not getting paid. Radio crew, we have to send you over to the commercial side of things. We're going to continue over here on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, there was a lot of fear and unrest. And by that, I mean Senate Democrats like Cory Booker were really, really, really angry. Got out the angry eyes, got a little impromptu press briefing, strutted up to the airport, I believe, in Newark. And he's like,
and so what's happening today?
I'm mad. I'm angry. C-SPAN, get the cameras out here. Brings out a little podium, slaps it in the airport, says, I'm Cory Booker. I'm mad. What's happening here is a tragedy. It's terrible. Terrible. And I'm going to level with you. The Trump administration was doing two things. Number one, carrying out operations that were already underway. Again, I talked to you about things like immigration fraud. Of course, this would involve a particular incident over in the San Francisco International Airport. This would be yesterday at about 10 p.m. And in the San Francisco International Airport,
Show the badge. Where's a badge?
there was this post that was sent out. ICE detained mother at airport, traveling with young daughter. First reported kidnapping at airport since Trump ordered ICE agents to report. They refused to show ID. I love how this post is written. I don't know who you are, witness yells. I don't know why you would know, federal agents, but all right. You could be someone kidnapping her, they said to the officers, like clearly, and they say they're always not identified. They are wearing ICE identification information. They're not just plain clothes dudes walking around in 5'11" and army surplus gear.
Where's your bag?
Can someone call 911?
I love it. Can someone call 911?
Where's your
Excellent.
badge? Can I see? Let me see your badge. Okay. No, can I see your?
Now, here's the fun part. They had originally reported that this was an illegal immigrant, or excuse me, they reported it was a U.S. citizen that was being kidnapped at the airport. Unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, because law enforcement was doing their job, the individual, the mother there that was being detained by ICE, according to the Department of Homeland Security, ICE officers arrested Angelina Lopez Jimenez and Wendy Godinez Lopez at the San Francisco International Airport. These illegal aliens had, you guessed it, a final order of removal from an immigration judge since 2019, while being escorted to the international terminal for processing and a final boot and see you later. Lopez Jimenez attempted to flee and resisted law enforcement officers. ICE is working as quickly as possible to repatriate the family unit to their home country of Guatemala. So again, this is what people were terrified of was going to be happening at airports all over the country. ICE is going to come in and they're just going to be grabbing people left and right. They're going to be checking bags. They're going to be saying papers, please. And it was going to be super duper scary. Super duper. They said TSA agents are sweating because ICE is standing over their shoulder menacingly. Yeah. Terrifying stuff. And they were getting all of this horrible grief, super trauma. Well, no. It turns out that President Trump essentially pulled a Ronald Reagan. So as a reminder, quite a while ago, for some of you only yesterday, President Reagan presided over a group of air traffic controllers who went on strike. And that cripples the United States because those who are air traffic controllers and the ancillary staff are required to be government and pseudo-government employees. And therefore, when there's some kind of a government shutdown or when they don't show up to work because of a strike, it essentially immobilizes the Federal Aviation Administration and all of those wonderful crop dusters and super freight liners that we all enjoy seeing zip across the sky. No, I'm not actually, the crop duster thing was a joke. So it crippled the air industry here in the United States. And President Reagan said, if you don't come back to work, you're all fired, and then I'll bring in the National Guard. And then the man did. And so President Trump told the Democrats, listen up, you don't push through funding for the Department of Homeland Security, and I'll send in ICE. I'll send them in. I'll send ICE right in there. They'll look through your bags. They'll look at you in the x-ray machine. They'll drive the weird airport golf carts that are never operational. I'll do it. Try me. And try he did. And it didn't really work out for the left just so well. We're going to talk about that. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So the President of the United States sends out ICE into various airports around the country, 13 of them. Now, I want to make this clear. There were some rumors as to who done it. Who dares be the person who sends ICE in to various facilities around the country? I mean, well, the President of the United States was quite clear. It was me. It was me all along. Think of the paperclip.
Whose idea was that to put ICE in the airport?
We're dealing really.
Whose idea was it?
Mine. That was mine.
And can I ask you? You said
That was like the paperclip. You know the story of the paperclip? 182 years ago, a man discovered the paperclip. It was so simple. And everybody that looked at it say, why didn't I think of that? ICE was my idea. First person I called was Tom Homan. I said, what do you think? He said, I think it's great. Then I saw today there was some masks on. I didn't think the masks were appropriate. I put out a statement and I asked them, would it be possible to take off the mask? Because they should wear a mask when they're dealing with the murderers and the thugs let into our country.
Correct, by the way. You're going to do TSA stuff? Cool. You know, you go ahead and you be normal federal agents. It's a pretty interesting political gambit, just to give you right up the information here. The President of the United States and Tom Homan made a bit of a gambit. You have ICE, who there are a lot of pockets of the country that aren't too fond of those federal law enforcement. And so the Trump administration said, let's see how they like helping out when everybody's waiting in lines out the door. And it turns out that, yeah, Americans by and large have liked that. Why? Because it produced results. TSA showed up to airports like Atlanta, for instance, this morning. And when the line was very, very much out the door, and I do want to be clear, there were people posting, all of the videos, lines out the door.
Atlanta Airport,
essentially
5 o'clock in the morning.
Getting into the airport several hours early. I mean, even more than your Midwestern dad.
To get in.
And past the ticket counter, down the street, long lines. Right? Nothing else needs to be said. It's immobilizing. It's demoralizing. So what did CNN get on TV to report a little bit later? That after Immigration Customs Enforcement had swooped in and started helping TSA, well, the line pretty much disappeared. I mean, here you go.
Agents there, what have you been seeing them doing?
Yep. Finally, we can take a deep breath here. The numbers have dropped off. The lines are getting shorter.
Oh, no. I love how the CNN anchor said, what are we seeing? What are you seeing? Are you okay? Is everyone all right? Whistle 3 times like a barn owl and once like a snow owl in case you're in any danger. And he's like, I think you need to take a deep breath. Go see your therapist. Touch a little grass. It turns out, just like previous federal strikes, or again, in this case, a shutdown in which individuals don't have paychecks, understandable, they might not all show up and do 8 lanes of open. I'm just kidding. There's no airport. Maybe. Dallas-Fort Worth, sometimes, where like all 8 lanes of the TSA are open. But in this case, hey, it turned out to be, kind of okay. Maybe federal law enforcement doing things like processing documents, guess what? Kind of a specialty of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I don't know if you know this. If you come back into the country from some other place, unless you're running for office in Minnesota, you have to go up to an Immigration Customs Enforcement official and declare things to Customs. Kind of cool. Almost like one of the things they're supposed to do.
I think the average wait time now is under 40 minutes. So if you have a flight to catch today, it's a good time to come to Hartsfield-Jackson International. Talking about those ICE agents.
Okay, now let's not get carried away. No, don't say it's a good time to come to the Atlanta International Airport. How about no? Easy. All right, now on to the outrage on this particular story before we move on through it. I played the clip for you a little bit earlier, at least the first bit. Cory Booker of New Jersey is super mad. And now all of the Democrats who are screaming their head off about ICE at airports look like big dumb idiots. More than usual. But I'll let Cory humiliate himself for you.
And so what's happening today in America that should outrage everybody?
Okay, prepare to be outraged. You got your pearls? All right, clutch them. Get your bath salts.
He's taking this very same agency that has been bursting into our schools.
Burst like your kids are sitting around on the weird foam mat with alphabet letters that don't really help kids learn at all, but are like in a bunch of elementary classrooms, and they're just sitting there learning Pahonics, and then the ICE agents kick in the door. Where are all the children? Oh, okay, it's not happening, but Cory Booker's trying to paint a picture.
Into our churches.
Well, mostly Minneapolis agitators, who are busting into churches if they think someone from federal law enforcement goes there.
Into our hospitals, into our courts, and even into the homes of Americans.
Oh no, they're in courts. Can you imagine law enforcement showing up and the clogged court system, which by the way, never seems to be mentioned here. So many of these things are delayed for months and years because the court system is already stacked. Good luck if you're an American citizen who needs the courts to resolve something. Because there are constant and endless cases of individuals, for example, who are illegal immigrants who get into horrific semi-driving accidents. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll let him continue.
He's taking that agency that is reckless and out of control and bringing them to our airports.
Oh, no.
Under the lie that somehow this is going to help deal with the long lines that he created in the first place.
So he got roasted over the coals on social media for this. So for those who aren't quite aware, a ratio is when there are more comments or the top comment underneath your post is liked more than the post is liked itself. Cory Booker got ratioed to, as the kids say, the deep, dark depths of the abyss. That man got ratioed to hell and gone. Because, first of all, the American public opinion openly and clearly blames Democrats for not funding the Department of Homeland Security. The big, beautiful bill of bountiful booty, the big, beautiful bill, that's what I call it. That one kind of funded ICE at the current rate of spending through 2027, but after a couple of things sunset, likely through 2029. So no matter whether or not you flip the switch on and off, you plug in the clapper, you start clapping away, ICE is going to be funded no matter what. You can't shut that off. Now, that hasn't stopped them. Chuck Schumer is also super duper extra angry. And he's suggested that this has now put Donald Trump in super duper triple jeopardy.
This Trump, he is tying himself in a triple knot.
Ooh, they teach that in Boy Scouts, I'm told.
All at once, TSA and the airports, the SAVE Act, and the war, which is just going on and on and on and getting worse and worse and worse and causing Americans to pay $4 for gasoline. And you know what? He keeps tightening the knot around himself. Last night he did it twice.
So first of all, making a noose joke about the president of the United States, awkwardly avoiding it. Also, ease down on the theater there, my dude. And the war. Oh, crap, the war. Oh, the war. I do love it. I love it when they pretend to care.
When he said don't negotiate unless you do TSA, and when he sent the ICE to the airports.
Again, they're going to go all in on the ICE to the airports. But if the Trump administration just has them help TSA, Americans do have short memories. Say what you will about that, but it is true. And if Americans get results, and then they look at the Democrats and they go, hey, why aren't you doing this? And the answer is, well, you women are too stupid after you change your name to get an ID. Like, what? And it's, well, ICE is, we got to stop ICE. But isn't ICE already funded all the way? Yeah, but we got to stop it. All of a sudden putting, again, the Coast Guard, TSA, and using those things, using the paychecks of those individuals as some type of a bludgeon against Republicans, it's not necessarily the move that is going to bring in the success and the victories. But of course, that's never stopped them before. Radio crew, we're going to send you over to the commercial side of things. We're going to continue over here on the Tony Kinnett Cast. We need to talk about a horrible situation in Chicago. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Okay, over here on the live stream, we don't do commercials. You tune into the show live, we go straight through. There is a situation from over the weekend that really does, it turns my stomach. From ABC News, an undocumented immigrant from Venezuela was arrested in the killing of a Loyola University Chicago student. That's according to the Department of Homeland Security. So Jose Medina, if your name is the last, guys, I understand a lot of people like hyphenating their names for some reason. I think that's ridiculous. No offense to all of you with hyphenated last names. I just think that's a little silly. Like, it's very performative anytime. We're not going to get into that right now. We'll save that one for later. Anyway, if you have the same last name on one side as you do on the other, you don't need to hyphenate it. You don't need to be Jose Medina, my dude. One's enough. But anywho, Jose Medina double, Jose Medina squared, a 25-year-old undocumented immigrant from Venezuela, because, of course, has been arrested and charged in the killing of 18-year-old Loyola University Chicago freshman Sheridan Gorman. The shooting occurred on March 19th at 1:30 a.m. That was Thursday. Gorman was walking with a group of friends on the lakefront to see the northern lights, and a masked gunman approached the group and opened fire. Gorman was struck in the head and pronounced dead at the scene. Now, we're going to get to some of the court information afterward. I want to play a clip for you from today from Chicago alderwoman Maria Haddon. One of the most disgusting things. So you just heard the description. A masked gunman walked up to the group of students looking at the northern lights. Oh no. And he walks up to this group who is agitating, startling, no. Walks up to the group who's just looking at the sky and tries gunning them down. Now listen to how this Chicago alderwoman describes this event and what she calls the demonization of this poor undocumented immigrant.
All the time, right? And they go out on the pier, they walk around. So the kids were out doing normal things people do in the neighborhood. And it sounds like this might have been a wrong place, wrong time, running into a person who had a gun. They might have startled this person at the
They might have startled him. Might have startled. Just, this guy walking around masked with a gun. And he, the one carrying the gun and pointing it at them, they startled him. They just gave him the old spook.
Into the pier unintentionally.
Unintentional. Come on, guys. Don't we all like throw on a mask and, go around pointing guns at groups of people? No? Nope. Nobody?
But that's.
Okay. I do want to point out one thing here that I think is kind of advantageous. If you are making the case that migrants are a bunch of dumb animals who respond to being startled by committing murder because they're just a bunch of big dumb animals, you're not making the argument you think you're making. You're not. I don't think that's necessarily the lesson that she wants people to walk away with, but that is exactly what she's suggesting. Now, I'm going to level with you here. As I've said before, if you are willing to break one law to gain access to this country, you are willing then to break other laws once you are here. Laws are a commitment of the individual to society, and they are to protect the innocent, the widow, and the orphan. But again, horrible stuff. Now, should also be noted, according to the New York Post, this individual, this Medina, he didn't show up for court today because he has a rare disease. Bringing the radio crew back from commercial. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, time to talk a little smoke and mirrors from the international side of the news thing. And no, I don't mean Cuba. We're going to get to that. A lot of nonsense regarding that. But regarding the Iran stuff, all through the weekend, y'all have been told, and even through today, about 27 different stories about what's going on. Even going into the show, before the commercial break that comes into the show, there's a top of the hour news break that's always playing in my right ear. And I even heard two different reports playing at the same time. One from the Salem News Network, one from the Fox News Network in my right ear. At the same time telling me, one, that Trump had promised a 5-day pause, and the other that there are strikes continuing right now and it was a ruse. And so we're going to break down some of these incidents, some of the things that happened, some of the things that absolutely did not happen, so that you guys aren't going to be given the runaround by individuals who are desperately trying to get the clicks from you on the social media sphere. So first and foremost, over the weekend, Iran, who's having a really rough time. Now, if you're not an expert in foreign policy, allow me to explain how you can know they are having a really rough time. Every single time you get to the news and there is the name of an Iranian regime official, the name is different. Okay? If you go to any kind of a story at all, and every single time the spokesperson or the leader is a completely different name, it's not going well for that crew at all. It's not. That is a classic rule of any kind of an organization going through something. So in the flailing around, while Iran is made some other decisions we're going to talk about, Iran fired a ballistic missile towards Diego Garcia. Now, we've talked about Diego Garcia before. It's that little teeny tiny island. Essentially, you get in a boat in Tanzania, as we all do, and then you just start sailing east. And I mean, you sail east for a very long time. You sail east from Tanzania longer than India is from north to south. It is rather out there. In fact, it's about 2,000 kilometers from the place that Iran launched this particular missile. Now, it missed, but there's a bit of an issue here. There's a bit of an issue with Iran firing ballistic missiles that are starting to reach this range, because I was told, and you were told, that Iran wasn't any kind of an imminent threat, that Iran had no ballistic missiles. In fact, the strongest, the furthest out that they could reach maybe was like Turkey, Kazakhstan, Egypt, maybe. And I mean, unless they're filming the fourth Mummy movie in Egypt, I mean, everything's got to be pretty fine. It turns out, no, the Iranians lied. And so in firing missiles, you started seeing a lot of European countries go, oh man, maybe we should take this seriously. But more so than that, before we get to what the Europeans have to say about it, which, trust me, you can live without for a little while here, I want to talk about what the Iranians are saying, because right now you have a bunch of different parties that are saying wildly different things. We're going to walk through it real quick here. First up, Iranian Major General Abdullahi. Yet again, another individual whose name you haven't heard before. Quote, the use of a new secret weapon will begin soon, and it will bring an end to the enemy's operations. Now, if you've been following this story, you might remember that Khamenei announced secret weapon usage right before the war, and then he died. And then there was this other dude whose name I don't even remember. There were a lot of L's in it. I don't know, Lazy Boy Lahi, let's call him. And this guy said there are super duper secret weapons. And it showed these AI images, because, when you want to show proof of something, you make an AI video of it, of these super huge missiles underground, no ports in the ceiling to move these missiles. I guess they were just going to fire them up at the crust, as one does. And that was their secret weapon. Well, now there's a totally new secret weapon, so be out on the lookout. It's going to be exciting stuff here. Now, a totally different Iranian official has announced today, quote, the Iranian people, this is by Ghalibaf. So think like Gandalf, but he needs a bath. So Ghalibaf announces, Iranian people demand a complete and remorseful punishment of the aggressors. All Iranian officials stand firmly. Well, a lot of them are kind of lying down 6 feet under. But anyway, stand firmly behind their supreme leader, who we have not seen yet, the gay, incompetent son, and according to the surgery documents, incontinent son of Ayatollah Khamenei, Mojtaba Khamenei. Anyway, they stand firmly behind their supreme leader and people until this goal is achieved. And then he makes the case, he says, so no negotiations have been held with the United States, and fake news is used to manipulate the financial and oil markets and escape the quagmire in which the U.S. and Israel are trapped. Now, he lets a little something leak there, a little something that maybe he shouldn't have said. What is it that he said? He said they're manipulating the markets. So right now, Iran, who has lost all of their last remaining advanced radar and anti-air capacity, save one or two rickety old crates on the coast, that, again, we'll show the footage in here in a second. They are braggadociously sharing footage of them missing F-15s. Yeah, we're going to get to that. But he's essentially confirmed that the Iranian government is trying to manipulate the cost of oil by firing a bunch of rockets at the Strait of Hormuz and spooking everybody so the price of crude goes up. And that by the time we get to the 60-day limit, Congress is going to go, we don't like you, President Trump. You're making oil expensive. Everyone hates you. And then we'll have to back off. That's the idea. That's the suggestion. However, it's not working. And it's not working for a couple of reasons. Number one, because Trump's entire philosophy is, I'm just going to do what I want and knock things over. And told Rubio, the man of 27 jobs, go and have fun. Secretary Hegseth as well. So this has caused a couple of issues. And we're going to talk about why he's really upset about the cost of the markets today. Because the markets today surged, I think gained 2% in value. We're going to cover that here in a minute. But regarding another senior official, this is Mohsen Rezai. A lot of great names if you're thinking about naming your kid after the sound of a respiratory infection. Quote, the war will continue until all damages are compensated, all economic sanctions are lifted, and a guarantee is obtained that the United States will not interfere in Iran's affairs. This is the decision of our nation, well, our leader, well, and our armed forces. Now, at this moment, we do have information that the United States is conducting a series of talks. This is where I'm going to give you some of the truth here on that side. That the United States is conducting a series of talks with the Kurds in the West, with certain groups that are considered operational cells inside on the Iranian populace, more in the center of the country, east of Tehran, down into the southern Persian ethnic region. And then over on the eastern portion of the country, the ethnic groups right next to Pakistan and Afghanistan. It is believed they are speaking, and we have information that an American flight from the U.S. Air Force did just fly over Azerbaijan, Sierra Alpha Mike 281. It's a 737. Likely going to be Witkoff over to Pakistan. Again, kind of a war going on there right now, so I hope that the man is safe, to begin some negotiations. Right now, by the way, haven't really said who. And this matters because right now we have to bring over what the President of the United States has said. So the President of the United States got out and made a lot of announcements over the weekend. He said, maybe we just, do a little Cuba here, permanent blackout for the entire country. All of their power infrastructure is down. Then they're not going to be able to recharge their batteries or their pagers. And so the President of the United States came out and made that case. And then he came back and said, well, actually, we would also kind of consider making a deal. And so essentially, in the span of about 24 hours, not in a gradient, but sometimes he'd say this and sometimes he'd say that, the president threw out a ton of different ideas to the rest of the world. We saw the president making that case over on camera about kind of making a deal, that sort of a thing. Here you go.
They want very much to make a deal. We'd like to make a deal, too. We're going to get together today by probably phone because it's very hard to find a country. It's very hard for them to get out, I guess. But we'll at some point very, very soon meet. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out.
Now, I'm going to level with you here. I've even seen in some of the comments, and well put, well, this doesn't sound like an unconditional surrender. It doesn't sound very unconditionally surrender-esque at all. 5 days from now, and I do mean 5 days from now, the USS Tripoli and the Marine Expeditionary Force will enter the area of operations for CENTCOM, meaning very, very, very close to Kharg Island in the United States, controlling a transitional regime's entire oil supply and dropping crude right through the floor. Again, those troops aren't particularly in place yet. The President of the United States got out there and made an announcement. Now you say, oh, well, the point of the announcement is to show that he's chicken. Hey, Taco, Trump always chickens out. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The reason the president said we're going to do a whole bunch of diplomacy stuff is because of what happened with the markets today. Major U.S. stock indices surged over 2% on Monday, March 23rd, 26, driven by relief over potential de-escalation in Middle East tensions, with the Dow Jones jumping over 1,100 points, or about 2.2%. The S&P rose 2%, and the NASDAQ Composite climbed 2.1% after President Trump indicated possible negotiations with Iran, which caused oil prices to fall more than 10%. Now, the entire day, if we go all the way up to the beginning and then down to the end, the Dow ended up only rising about 1.4%. The S&P only rose to 1.5%, and the NASDAQ up to 1.53%. But that initial surge, falling oil prices falling down, the West Texas Intermediate on oil futures fell down to $88 a barrel. Brent crude down under 100 again to $99 in the sector performance, because I know you're like, Tony, tell me the sector performance stuff. Well, radio crew, we're not going to do that for you. We're going to do that for the live stream. I know you are excited about the sector performance stuff, so we'll talk about that soon. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, you ready for this? The sector performance. All 11 major sectors gained. Tesla leading the gains among tech giants with a 3.5% raise. Why does the president get out there and make the case? maybe we'll make some kind of a deal. I don't know. The president is throwing things out into the public again to directly interfere because he knows the rest of the world hangs off of the words that he says. This is not 3D chess. This is a man who has done the exact same thing his entire life. That's just the way that the man operates in this instance. Now, does this mean that the president of the United States is going to, do this big co-negotiation operation? At the same time that he's tweeting these things out, he's also tweeting things that are reminiscent of kill 'em all, every regime man, hang him by his cojones, that kind of a thing. I would be slightly hesitant before you get ahead of your skis in the way that a lot of media has, and then happens to be wrong, dead wrong. And by that I mean, according to the Washington Post, U.S. officials say, now I did read the article, the U.S. officials, they don't even go into which departments that these U.S. officials are making these statements from. So in a made-up statement by the Washington Post official sock puppet, they have reported it is unlikely the United States is able to overthrow Iran's theocratic regime or permanently block its nuclear program, even with military pressure. Now, I'll level with you here. As far as intelligence reports are concerned, that ain't how those are written. Intelligence reports say it is not possible with this number of things in this amount of time. There is never, in any way, shape, or form, any intelligence report delivered to the president, stamped with approval by the Director of National Intelligence that goes, never, ever, never for never, never, ever. That's not how that goes. Nothing is certain and concrete in this world. There are things with high certainty, but you don't, with high certainty, go, never, 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 everything is fine. Also, rumors circulated on the media side that a U.S. F-15 was shot down over Kuwait. They say, nope, not true. That's according to CENTCOM, and then shared the transponder information for the F-15, showing that it was not, in fact, shot down at all. Then we get over to a little bit of the war footage, which, again, I'm just going to level with you. Kind of cool stuff. So first of all, CENTCOM releasing a couple more explosions, a couple of things going boom. This particular explosive missile truck, that's an older model. That is an older Russian model from the late 90s. So why do I tell you that? They're getting down to the bottom of the barrel. Subhanallah. Boom. Beautiful ordnance right there. Also, B-52s are flying unharried JDAM deliveries, nice 2,000 pounds of freedom, over regional IRGC targets. B-52 is such a freaking beast. All right, don't go anywhere. We're going to bring the radio crew back from commercial. We got more news to cover. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Just a curbside prophet with my hand.
So the president of the United States is saying maybe we're gonna, maybe not, who knows? And of course we do have troops getting ever closer to Karg during the day. What is everyone else saying? Well, first of all, from the Prime Minister of Israel, he gets out there and says about the president, well, whatever we'll do it together. There's something about this that I find humorous.
Overnight, President Trump said that if in 48 hours the Iranians don't open the Strait of Hormuz, that there will be strikes against the power grids in Iran. Will you participate in those strikes, and what do you think should happen next in this campaign?
I think President Trump knows exactly what he's doing, and whatever we do together.
Yeah. By the way, that's how you talk to press. I don't care what country you're from. And speaking of how other countries are talking to the press, per Bloomberg, Saudi Arabia plans to retaliate via military means if the Iranians try throwing any rockets, bombs, missiles, etc. at their water and electricity infrastructure. So the Saudis have, again, reportedly, is according to one military source in the region, is assembling a couple of response groups to retaliate quickly if the Iranians lob something and perhaps get lucky. Now, both the Saudi Arabians and the United Arab Emirates are moving closer to joint military operations alongside the Trump administration. Qatar has begun cracking down on pro-Iranian influencers and have kicked some of the Al Jazeera journalists from the country. That's wild. That's not something I thought I would see in my lifetime. Kuwait has launched a task force to go after elements of the Iranian proxy group Hezbollah inside the country. Now, Oman is keeping a safe distance. They're trying to kind of contradict the president of the United States. They're just trying to come out and say, whatever you're hearing, it's not true. And no one cares because it's Oman. They have a gross domestic product that is dwarfed by my cousin's cattle farm. I don't even have a cousin that has a cattle farm. That's how bad Oman is doing on the international stage. Then Bahrain is also announcing to the United Nations that people need to send boats immediately. That's Bahrain has filed an official request to the United Nations that anyone who wants to participate should bring in a lot of ships. Now, it's expected that Russia and China are going to veto that. We'll have to see. Now, on the Al Jazeera side, they are citing local police sources, suggesting that the United States is currently striking a series of Iranian-backed Popular Mobilization Front positions east of Ramadi, Iraq. What appears to be going on outside of the international front phase is that in both Syria and Iran, both in Syria and Iraq, and then also in Western Iran, the United States and other partners in the region are preparing the way for a Kurdish announcement of full independence and autonomy, probably claiming a good dozen, maybe probably 115 miles into Iranian territory as being part of Kurdistan. So I would keep an eye on that in the next couple of days. Now, this brings us over to the other international news from the day, which is Cuba. So you might remember that the lesbian flotilla announced they were making their way to Cuba. Why? For the people. Oh, the people. They were going to get over to Cuba and they were going to deliver medical supplies and they were going to deliver solar panels to people in hospitals. The hospitals never got the solar panels. As I told you, those solar panels were going to be taken by the regime and used for government facilities. That's exactly what happened. Now, I do enjoy that some of the medical technology that they brought over with them was invented and sold by Israel, because Cuba, which you're told has cured everything from Alzheimer's to the common cold to a lung cancer vaccine, all three of which are just completely false, can't invent or create any kind of technology in their own merit. There's this weird old propaganda line that Cuba is like curing all of the diseases on planet Earth. Now, no one really believes that anymore, but every once in a while, the Greta Thunbergs, they fall for that old classic line again. But my personal favorite, Hassan Piker, he has announced that things are so great in Cuba that, you know what? They don't even mind the blackouts. In fact, they like the blackouts in Cuba. They like how poor they are. He said from his 5-star hotel, sipping Mai Tais given to him by the Cuban government.
It's incredible. It's truly one of my favorite places officially. I totally understand why Will was saying that.
Now, I do appreciate a couple of things. So when Hassan is over in China, this leftist YouTube, Twitch streaming goober, whatever, this individual dresses up like Chairman Mao. Now that he's over in Cuba, he's got on like the half-sewn green hat so that he's like pretending to be Fidel. I love the desperate cosplay that just comes across as one of the most pathetic cuck behaviors known to man.
About Cuba. It's remarkable. The people's resilience is remarkable. There's like rolling blackouts that take place throughout the day, every day, all around the country, right? 11 million people. But today is a beautiful day out here. It's like 75 degrees, sunny. People are partying. People are partying in the fucking streets.
I love it. I love that. People are partying everywhere. People just parties, thrills, joys, cheering. Oh, it's so great and wonderful. Hassan Piker, everybody's just out there, partying it up. Well, footage has now emerged, because again, of course it has, of Hassan Piker and the other influencers who were tossing bits of food to people, again, who are hungry because there's no money. Again, Cuba's in a terrible state. They're tossing food in exchange to film the children dancing in the streets. So you see the influencers tossing the food to get the children to start dancing. Remember the outrage over President Trump tossing a couple of paper towel rolls after a hurricane? I'm just saying, when you get out there and act exactly like the critics, the accurate critics of socialist countries, you get out there and act just like the socialist ruling class whenever you go there. I mean, you kind of prove the point. All of the no true Scotsman fallacy people who say, well, we've never tried socialism or whatever, they sure do get to these places and act exactly like every single socialist and communist administration in the history of this world. Now, this brings us over to my personal bile moment from this particular trip that they've gone, their little social, justice excursion for rescue. They announced this huge aid campaign. And then it turns out after they did this huge performative thing at the hospital and made all of these announcements about healthcare, the power loss that came from the generators being used for a concert that they were attending caused some individuals on the ventilator to die because of the power loss. Radio crew, we are going to catch you guys over on tomorrow side of things. We're going to continue on the live stream. So Daily Signal, or youtube.com/Daily Signal, you'll find us there. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Now we're going to continue over on the live stream side. So according to Hassan, this is on 3 p.m. yesterday, Cuban doctors told me they have to they have to sew up patients mid-surgery when the generators run out of gas. But MAGA on here, he's like Trump supporters on social media, are too busy lying about the people that went out to Cuba with aid to turn everything into a distractive spectacle. Pure MAGA propaganda. You're all cattle if you fall for it. Now, I'm not going to play all the particular clips of his little, concert of joy and fun here. When they, again, went out and did, attended this fun concert, all the generators going so they could, cheer and have a good time. I will, however, put on the screen a particular report that has been, I should say there's a second testimony of this from a different individual in Cuba, that after the generators were kind of repositioned and redirected away supposedly from the hospitals to a concert venue for this huge electrified 5-star hotel experience and concert for all the influencers that came to Cuba to help. There were patients who, due to the power outages, passed away that evening because the ventilators shut down. So to the socialist aggrandizers over in Cuba, you're acting exactly as is expected. Now, for a little bonus tone of stuff tonight, we're out of the broadcast hour on the radio and TV side. So on the live stream bonus section here, a couple of final news reports. We're going to tackle that. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
All right, a little bit of bonus tonus for you here this evening. From the Associated Press, the Supreme Court seems skeptical of laws in 14 states that allow counting mail ballots that arrive after Election Day. Well, I would certainly hope so. So, according to the article, on March 23rd, that being today, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in Watson versus the Republican National Committee, a case challenging a Mississippi law that allows mail-in ballots, which are postmarked by Election Day, to be counted if they arrive within 5 days. So the AP frames this as the conservative majority appeared skeptical of such grace periods, questioning whether federal law requires ballots to be both cast and received by Election Day. They say a ruling against the law expected by late June could upend similar voting rules in 14 states and D.C. ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Good. The idea that you can just keep on receiving ballots, well, I mean, it's postmarked right here, as we have seen consistently in cases, not just in blue states, but in red states, those who receive ballots after the election that are postmarked later have been counted We've seen cases like this in which ballots have been overturned. In Colorado, I believe we saw a recount election in the 2010s happen, and in a case regarding this in Michigan. The idea that you can just send in ballots just forever, whenever, and then pretend that that's a legal and stable election, it's really not palatable to the American people. Now, of course, the left is still losing their mind over this and suggesting that the Trump administration is trying to use this with the Supreme Court, is trying to use the Save America Act to step in and now like delete mail-in ballots forever. All of the forever. I really do appreciate this. I do. I appreciate this from all of the Democrats on this side. I do want you to hear Adam Schiff, pencil neck himself, losing his mind about the Supreme Court case. It's worth a good chuckle.
So the Supreme Court heard argument today in a hugely consequential case.
Anytime you're a grown man and you start your video, first of all, he's holding the camera himself. You know, he's doing like hi, I'm a selfie influencer man. And he also brings out the piano, the really sad piano music. It sounds like the first movement of Beethoven's Midnight Sonata, but played by a depressed penguin.
The Supreme Court heard argument today in a hugely consequential case involving absentee ballots. The 6 conservatives on the court, or the 6 Republican-appointed justices on the court, seem very skeptical of a Mississippi law that allows you to mail your ballot prior to Election Day as long as it arrives within 5 days of Election Day.
Now, one could ask, hey, wait a minute here. Why are you mailing in a ballot right before the election? You know, like let's say it's Election Day. Hey, happy Election Day, whatever. And you show up not to the voting location to vote in person and just get it done. You show up on Election Day to mail in your ballot. Why? Just drive a couple blocks and go vote. What are you doing? Turn it in your ballot. No.
They're likely to strike that down, which means that many states like California that allow voters to cast ballots before Election Day or on Election Day, as long as they're postmarked, they get counted. Up to 7 days in California, 5 days in Mississippi. The court seems ready to strike that down. This is not a constitutional conservative thing. This is a Republican thing. Let's just face it. The Supreme Court is now a Republican court, and the Republicans on the court seem ready to do Donald Trump's bidding.
All right. So again, really, really low effort gaslighting here. I mean, first and foremost, my particular favorite, it goes into they're just trying to do Donald Trump's bidding. I will remind you that they have ruled against the president of the United States multiple times. You don't get to play that line. You don't get to do that. If they kind of buck tradition a lot, they're not doing the bidding. That's not a thing. But number two, if you think that Americans are going to weep and mourn for California having tighter standards on its elections, dude.
The Constitution gives the states the power to control elections. The Supreme Court is ready to take that away.
That's not true. Okay, this idea that like your state has the right to just screw people over on elections is not true. That is not true. Your state does not have a constitutional right to abandon the rights of individuals to be adequately and correctly and fairly represented by casting their ballots. The United States government at the federal level has directly and consistently intervened on behalf of citizens within states whose governments wanted to, for example, set up a poll tax, make instructions really difficult or nonsensical, or set up rules that allow individuals who might be in power in a particular state to act fraudulently. And by the way, if the law is a Mississippi law, what's the issue? Isn't Mississippi like a red state? What's the problem? Is the Supreme Court only allowed to rule on cases that you find it appropriate for them to rule on?
On a Republican Party basis, it will disenfranchise potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of people.
Why? Again, why? This is a question a lot of Americans have. Why is it that if I have to get up a certain time, a certain day and go vote, or I have to cast my ballot early if I'm going to be gone somewhere and I get a mail-in ballot, why then do you get to be lazy and ignore the rules? Why do I have to have a voter ID and go through all of the processes? But if you show up in Minnesota and somebody vouches for you, hesto presto, you're good to go. No. And Americans are not necessarily going to shed the kinds of tears that he's expecting. I just don't see it. Now, could I be wrong and there be mass outrage over that? I mean, I kind of doubt it. Now, other Democrat senators are simultaneously trying to claim that, yeah, well, sure, the Department of Homeland Security that I just voted to keep shut down. National security is very, very, very important to me. When you have the CNN anchor looking at you like they don't even believe you, oof.
There have been concerns since the start of this war about potential cyber attacks. Is the U.S. infrastructure potentially prepared for that possibility?
Look, keeping our country safe, defending the homeland, I have no higher priority in Congress.
Yeah, you're hearing this from Democrat representatives and senators all over the country, all over. And voters aren't buying it. And this is why, by the way, according to the data, Democrats lead via the generic congressional ballot. Essentially, when you ask people, hey, you're more likely to vote in Congress, for a Republican or a Democrat in this coming election. Now, a couple of weeks ago, you had polls saying that Democrats were up 9 points. You had Democrats, coming out here in the middle of February, they were up 6 points, according to NBC News. And then you started getting polls that sort of seemed like outliers because we're in a midterm year. This shouldn't, you shouldn't have some kind of a poll here among, for example, 2,000 registered voters at the end of February, according to Harvard Harris, which had Republicans at 50 and Democrats at 50. That was strange, but it was seen as kind of an outlier, okay? And ever since that point, whether we're looking at Yahoo News polls, whether we're looking at The Economist and YouGov, Morning Consult, Quantus Insights, Emerson, Reuters, and Ipsos, the margin has been shrinking for Democrats in leadership. Amid this, again, a time that is considered rather tumultuous. And so if the Trump administration can take ICE and use ICE to soften the issues with the Transportation Security Administration delays, and can end the Iranian war in a way that gets gas prices down, that kind of spells a lot of doom for the left going into the midterm year. And that's kind of the whole point of these particular interviews. Because what Americans want are results. They want you to come out and say, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to accomplish it, and here's what's going to happen. And then they kind of remember. They do. Americans do tend to remember what it is that you promised them. So we're going to have to see if this trend continues. Again, nothing sure here. But on the media side, things are getting rather funny. So Seth MacFarlane, he used to be over at CBS, and for years, you were told this was, like all of the other journalists at CBS, this was one of the most outstanding, upstanding, handstanding, incredible American journalists that ever journalismed ever. Forever, ever. And now he is announced after leaving CBS, supposedly because, the new ownership under Barry Weiss was just, or the new direction under Barry Weiss was just going to be so far to the right that his independent journalist, unbiased heart just couldn't take it. He has now, he came out this morning and announced that 9 days after leaving CBS, he's found a new professional home.
Some news to share, and it's good news. I have a new platform for my independent, unfiltered reporting.
So independent, unfiltered.
Effective immediately, I'm chief Washington correspondent for the Midas Touch Network.
The Midas Touch Network? Really? I mean, essentially the left version of Breitbart. Really? That's your announcement? You're now the chief, so independent, so journal. He's going to be out there right along Adam Mockler, losing his mind and screaming because the president of the United States made a joke about Iran. Yes, the independent journalism, it continues.
And beginning in about 2 or 3 weeks, I'll begin as anchor of a daily program called Scott MacFarlane Reports.
I wonder how that's going to go.
The Midas Touch and I share this same North Star of communicating, that when you have news to break or something important to explain, just get to it. Straight to the point. As soon as you open the camera and open the microphone, simply, declaratively, and conversationally explain what's happening, explain what it means. Put aside the production theater and the useless bells and whistles. Just get to it.
Now, there is an element to what he is saying that has a little bit of merit. I'm going to talk about that here in just a second regarding Jake Tapper. But for this fool, this goofball, to get in front of everyone and announce that they've finally cracked the code, they figured out what it is that Americans want, and at least being open and honest about the fact that he's now going to be really, 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 really far over to the left. By the way, I would prefer this. I would prefer that journalists get out there and say, look, these are my political views. So I'm going to tell you what the situation is, and then I'm going to tell you how I feel about it. Then I'm going to give you my analysis. I'm going to give you the news, and I'm going to give you my analysis of it, and then some commentary. That's fine, because that puts it all right out there. There's no hiding the ball. People know where you're coming from. Because that doesn't necessarily or inherently discredit you. I know that when Nate Silver gets out to talk about polling data, that he is coming at it from the left. He admits where his past comes from. So then when I see him analyze things from a left-wing perspective, I go, well, yeah, I mean, of course Nate would do that. Dude's over on the left. Yeah, that's fine. I can separate that out. Now, what I really enjoy here is that he likes to claim that he is like inventing the wheel here. Never have we seen somebody just unabashedly, super duper newsically just strut out and oh wow, just incredible. He's none of the pageantry. Just going to come right out and deliver the unbroken, unvarnished news. Now, this brings us over to Jake Tapper, because CNN is also doing this kind of weird thing. And I'm pulling up this particular photo so that I can show it to you guys over on the live stream side of things. Jake Tapper, who normally is on his set doing his, the lead with CNN, getting out there, announcing he's, on the set, the steel and glass industrial sector of, well, network television. On Friday, we saw something that was a little bit different. All right, I've got that particular image loaded. Let me pull it up here for you. Instead of the normal glass and metal set of the lead, he instead showed up on TV from what appeared to be his office. Now, I kind of doubt that this is actually his real office, but it might be. He's from his office. He's got a bunch of knickknacks on his desk. He's got a lot of political posters and campaign signs on the wall. And I mean, from everybody, left wing, right wing. It's just, look at all this. He's in his office and he's doing a little from his desk style show, and CNN's running it from their 5 to 7 p.m. hour range. This tickled me. And not only is it tickling me because that is quite literally a lot of our sets here on the broader hybrid podcast media side of things, but when you couple that with McFarlane, when you couple that with the left-wing Scott McFarlane, not Seth MacFarlane, LOL. When you couple that with a Scott McFarlane kind of announcement, there's a really interesting trend that's taking place. Now, I said this on Friday before he made this announcement, but if you'll humor me for a second, there is a major shift that is going on in right-wing, left-wing, political and news media in general. Everything is changing, and nobody's talking about it. And I'm serious, no one is talking about it. So there are two ages. We operate in ages of things like major trends. So there was, after the advent of the smartphone, there was the credible organization age, where if you were on social media or you were choosing a show, whether it was on the internet, whether it was on a social media platform, which was dedicated to their account. So you'd go on a social media account, you'd see CNN, whether you'd go to the internet and go to CNN.com, there was a credible organization age where people followed and they would watch content that was published by what they considered to be credible organizations. And then after that, in the 2010s, you had an era of the influencer and the podcaster, which began, in which individuals, personalities, started breaking from some of these corporations, these organizations that had credibility, and they kind of forged their own way, Fleetwood Mac style. And they went out and they gained huge followings. And all at the same time, a lot of these corporations, some of which I was a part, made the choice to go as hard as they could into their organizational credibility, because organizations at the political side, they lag behind by several years. Bureaucracies always slow things down. And it really terrifies lawyers for a company to say, we're going to get out there and we're going to break some eggs to make an omelet, and we're going to try to stay at the forefront of things. And so the reason that we get to, of all things, turning on your TV, if you decided to see Jake Tapper of CNN, a network 5 p.m. show, out of his office with crappy lighting, horrible focus, two people awkwardly sitting on his couch, And, again, nothing wrong with having a couch in the studio. I mean, I hear you. Where does this come from and why? Hear me out. No one is going into broadcast media anymore. That is the first problem. There are two major problems, all the way from Fox to CNN to MS Now to Midas Touch to the Daily Wire to the Daily Signal to the Daily Caller. No one is going into broadcast news media anymore. Don't get me wrong. There are people who are graduating with journalism degrees from colleges, but no one is going into broadcast media. Allow me to explain. So the youngest of the big three, CNN, MS Now, Fox News, the two youngest TV hosts right now are Lawrence Jones over at Fox and Caitlin Collins over at CNN. They are both 33 years old. I believe, at least so far as to right now, I am probably the second or the third youngest syndicated radio and cable TV host in the country. I'm 30. June of 95. I'm 30 years old. I do not know of anyone else in political media who is younger than I am that has gone into broadcast news and cable and TV. There are a ton of people who are younger than me and my age that are in the podcast and influencer side of things, but there's a bit of an issue here. Older hosts, and I mean all of the hosts that are retiring or they're losing their audience and they're getting let go. Fox, CNN, MS Now, CBS, ABC, Newsmax went through and cut several contracts, all of them, left, right, center, all of them are losing their older hosts. And no one's going in. And you're thinking, well, that's because everyone's shifting away, Tony. Everyone's shifting to independent media. Here's the issue. So while podcasts and live streams have taken a ton of that audience pie in through this influencer age, there's a bit of a problem because many of these hosts, these new podcaster hosts, they are terrible newscasters. They're horrible at it. They're awful. And I'm very, very, very tempted to name names, but there are individuals who are influencers who got into politics, who know absolutely nothing about politics, geography, law, economics, religion, culture, outside of the things that they just regurgitate on the air from social media. So when you have a guy who doesn't know anything about the subject and has to go,
oh, pull it up, Jamie.
It is a little bit awkward because now you have essentially people who are podcasting based on Google. That's a bit of a problem because in this day and age, you can create any kind of information you want just like that. And here's the problem. The big reason why a huge portion of the country, most of this audience included, still hasn't totally abandoned major network or legacy media brands or their right-wing kind of corporate equivalents is because when big news is happening, you need to-the-point details. Here's what's going on. Here's what we know. Here are the clips. Here's the reporter. Here's the stuff. You don't need some rambling 2-hour story from some podcast Twitch streamer bro rambling and meandering on through things. You don't need that. And because of that, what you have right now, a lot of the networks are currently trying to mimic. This stems from some of the podcasters, which through the 2010s, they had some kind of network or newscasting experience. Or, some of them were let go or fired or their contracts were allowed to expire because they were canceled during the cancellation age, which paralleled the podcast or influencer era. So these hybrid hosts, often the head of a non-network brand, would drive huge audiences because they had the familiar approach of communicating with an audience, hopefully without being arrogant or awful, that kind of podcaster repertoire, but they had enough reliable newscasting experience, or at least a talent for it, of a network affiliate host. This is where you got like the Ben Shapiro, the Pod Save America, Obama guys, Steven Crowder, who used to be at Fox. They took the news cycle reporting out of the blogosphere credible organization age, and they brought it into this influencer age. And that created two things. First of all, they got huge audiences really quickly and developed almost religious, like cult-like followings. And then you started to see some of the big popular network talent ditch doing their current jobs, or they were fired, and started taking that approach because they were like, oh my gosh, look at all the people getting all of the money and the views and the sponsorships. That's why Megyn Kelly pieced out. She said, well, it was to avoid corporate influence. Okay. And then stepped out and did her own thing because once you're in control of everything, you have a huge kind of worshipful audience. Things naturally flood forward. So, for example, Megyn Kelly in 2020, Tucker in 2023, you had their imitations like Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon from CNN or Mehdi Hassan from MSNBC, MS Now, Joy Reid, who they kicked out and later started imitating this kind of routine, that became the driver for the influencer age. And don't get me wrong, donors threw all kinds of money at these people. Because all you had to be willing to do throughout the 2010s era was just say, I'm no longer a Democrat, and donors would parachute in to throw money at you. I've often referenced there's one podcaster who I have gone on their show a couple of times who so opulently threw money around, it bewilders me. Who, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not the world's thriftiest dude, but I try to be respectful of the money that like goes into the show. But the influencer age drove all of this money. But here's the problem. Now the influencer age is waning. It's over. It's ending. The age of people just having some kind of a personality or a large social media following and being important, it's over. I have a social media account, Ministry of Truth, got like 300 some thousand followers. No one cares. No one cares. Why would you care? It doesn't matter. It's not enough anymore to be a personality with a ton of followers. People are starting to once again be judged by what it is they bring to the table. And here's the thing that you, the people who are watching this right now at 8:22 p.m. in the evening, what you have told me is audiences can't stand. Number one, you do not want the stuffy, stale, arrogant journalism degree broadcaster to lie to you, to tell you that anything that you're seeing is completely false and imaginary, and that you're an evil person, while they just regurgitate what the other network affiliates are saying. Remember during COVID, that clip that went viral of all of the network affiliates owned by ABC and MSNBC and Nexstar and the Fox and all of those affiliates, where the newscaster was saying the same thing about COVID-19 misinformation or whatever? People don't like that. They don't care for that. Because there's no substance, there's no honesty, there's no accountability. It's just this corporate entity that cuts you off from any kind of accountability. Number two, no one wants to watch a podcaster hem and haw for 3 hours just to get to 15 minutes of news and find out that most of it has been debunked as regurgitated or AI or bot-pushed poop by the next day. So then what is it that people want? Well, this is what we're kind of trying to provide to you. It is a hybrid, it's a broadcast structured, but kind of podcast atmosphere, live stream and news analysis show, where I stick to a radio or TV clock to keep it moving, get through the stories, give you the news that you need, but without hopefully taking myself too seriously and being level with you and trying to bring on other guests and having fun and giving you a little sarcastic analysis and being a normal person. I'm not the first one remotely to get to do this at all, but we are trying to refine that because I think that's where things are going. Now, funny enough, this is actually something that I think Fox News kind of stumbled into with Will Cain. Will Cain, good friend of the show, he had his Will Cain show that was a radio show, but that was done kind of podcast-centric, and it was really successful. So they brought him up and they gave him the 4 p.m. hour slot, and he has a slightly different studio than all of the other Fox News hosts, and it's a wildly successful show. Now, I know for a fact it's absolutely why they licensed the Ruthless Podcast guys, because this is where news is heading. And of course, Axios and the Daily Wire, left and right, have really tried reformatting how they do their podcasts. This is why Jake Tapper is broadcasting from his office in the 5 to 7 p.m. hour. It's why this former CBS guy is announcing he's doing a daily show with the Midas Touch Network. Because people want both. They want the relevance, the recency, the polish of live network news, maybe a little chyron on the screen to tell you where you are in the show, with the clips appearing on the screen so you get a little idea for what's going on. And they want that through the lens of a personality-driven analysis and normal human character that's also not wrong. And here's the real rub. It's the only reason that I can possibly fathom as to why we've grown as fast as we have in the last 2 years. Show's 2 years old, and it's already, we're over 100,000 views on just the YouTube side tonight. And I don't understand why. I'm not trying to be falsely modest here. There is literally nothing special about a sarcastic former teacher from Indiana who brings you some of the news and some analysis and then tries to keep abreast of some things and share it with you. The only thing that I can think of that's really effective here is how we are trying to do the show. Is trying to keep it to the point and clear to you. Bring in the best elements from the Top News in 10 product that we have into the show, and then relay that to you. And then after the broadcast hour, if we do some of this informal analysis, well, hey, there you go. If you've already got the news for the day, all of the different detailed updates, cool, presto, no problem. But if you do stick around in the live chat and you're, hanging around and talking about these things, well, this is one of the things that we do try to provide the rest of you who do choose to steep in the political bathwater. And I think, this is a why that we're beating out the numbers of Joy Reid, or based on the day, Benny Johnson, or definitely some of the audience decline that you've seen taking place in the last couple of months. For example, just being a personality, when I say that that's not enough anymore, I mean it. Megyn Kelly, back in 9 months ago, 10 months ago, she was regularly getting between like 200, 300, 500,000, a million views per episode. Now she's like occasionally breaking 100K, maybe 200K, maybe. It's a reduction in audience. A lot of people are leaving the influencer brand because people want results. They want deliverables. And now to the CNN side of things, at February 2026, which is the most recent information that we have, the total number of viewers that CNN is currently delivering today is like 519,000 total viewers. So things are changing pretty quickly there. So that was just kind of an analysis that I kind of wanted to throw your way, because the winds that are changing do matter when we get into the next election cycle. So that said, we're going to wrap things up. Take care. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We'll be here tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, with a lot more. Take care.